Welcome into another episode of Always Talking Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. It's August. Fall camps are underway. Week 0, if you celebrate it, is less than 3 weeks away. And that means here on ATB, it's time for some conference previews and it's time to hand out some win totals for the 2025 season. We are kicking things off today with the Big Ten. And joining us today, former Michigan quarterback, co-host of Crain and Company, a man of many talents because he's a budding country music artist. David Cohn joins us today. Welcome in, David.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Dave, we appreciate you joining us, man. And we're going to do some, like I said, we're going to do some Big Ten win totals, talk a little Big Ten football, the back-to-back national championship Big Ten.
Let's kind of just look at the conferences overall real quick. We talked about Penn State a little bit. I'm with you there. I mean, I think that for the first time in a long time, they can go toe-to-toe with the Buckeyes. Whether or not they can get it done, whether or not James Franklin can finally get that monkey off his back, winning that top 5 matchup, that remains to be seen. Obviously, you've got people talking a lot about Indiana and Illinois and Oregon and USC, and it seems like the conference, it's been top heavy for the past couple of years, obviously winning the national championship, but it seems like it's getting a little bit deeper. We're going to talk, win totals here in a second, talk sleepers and everything, but just give me your overall just like thoughts on the Big Ten and the health of the Big Ten as a conference, obviously coming off those back-to-back national championships.
Yeah, well, there should be a lot of excitement coming out of Las Vegas with media days, with having back-to-back national champs. I mean, that's truly incredible. There's a lot to be excited for. And just by definition, you have to get somewhat deeper if you continue to add teams, right? Like if you got 18 teams, and of course, you got to have a little bit more depth. I do still see the league as top heavy. But then again, like which league isn't? Like which league in any sport anywhere doesn't have the teams that are the best, and you have some other programs that aren't the best, and then that's usually how it's going to be. So I don't think that that's as much of a critique. And plus, you have to understand that this league was assembled with more than just football in mind, and so you're trying to create a league that also crushes it during college basketball season, and also can be competitive in baseball and hockey and other sports like that. But a lot to be excited about. The Penn State dynamic is really interesting because it does feel a lot like Kirby Smart in 21 to me, in that it's like, man, look at the roster. Truly incredible. Look at the schedule. Manageable. But they haven't gotten it done. And to continue the analogy, Kirby hasn't beaten Nick Saban. Is this a year where it can happen? And you go and you look at that matchup that they had in the SEC championship game. Guess who wins? It's Alabama. And we thought, here we go again. And then they get a rematch in the national championship, and Kirby Smart finally gets over that hump. Not only wins that natty, follows it up the next year and wins another one with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. Is this the year James Franklin can say, hey, it's my turn to do that? I finally have a roster with a bunch of depth, 2,000-yard backs. We got a returning quarterback who's played a lot of football. He's gotten his mistakes out of the way. We're going to put him toe-to-toe with anyone in the country. And look at the coordinators that we have. Right? Like this, we've assembled the team who can win it all this year. I'm really interested to see if James Franklin can do that at Penn State. And I think that, we had just come off the heels of talking about Clemson. I think there's a lot of similarities with Clemson this year in terms of just how that roster is constructed, and one of the few programs returning a quarterback. That's one of the more interesting things. So many of these traditional top dog teams in the country are starting new quarterbacks. And some of them are brand new. Some of them aren't quite brand new, but they're still new when you think about Georgia and Alabama and Michigan and Buckeyes. And so these couple teams that have deep rosters but also are returning quarterbacks, I'm really interested to see how they can manage the season, and can they go on that run. Remember, it was that run that the Buckeyes went on. That's the reason they're national champs in a 12-team playoff. They wouldn't have even made a 14 playoff. I really think it was losing to Michigan last year lit a fire under them, and they go on this incredible run and they win the national championship.
Yeah, Coney, we're going to get in and talk some. We're going to talk some win totals, man. We're going to see if we can make some people some money at home here, and look at the conference and see some win totals that we're targeting overall in the Big Ten this year. And we really want to give you the first crack at it. What is a team in the Big Ten this year that you're targeting either over or under their season win total this year?
Yeah, so hit me with the Illinois win total. Is it 8.5 right now? I want to go off the lines you have.
Yep, it's 8.5 on FanDuel right now.
I like the over 8.5 for Illinois. I mean, if you guys want to rattle off the schedule for people, then feel free. But I like the over 8.5 for Illinois. I think, again, talking about the way the roster is constructed and the momentum from last year carrying in the way that Brett Bielema, he was trying to make a case on social media. Well, actually, hey, we're a 9-3 team that could get in the college football playoff. And I have a lot of respect for Brett Bielema. Returning Luke Altmaier, you can just see the gamer in the way that he plays when he had transferred in from Ole Miss. I like Illinois. I think they were ranked 4th in the Big Ten media poll, and there's a reason that they're 4th, ahead of programs like Michigan and Iowa and Nebraska and USC. Talking about some of those other programs, what do you have Washington at right now? Do you have 7.5 or do you have 7 on the dot?
7.5.
I like the over, which would be a minimum of 8-4 for Washington, and I think the quarterback they're bringing in is a heck of a football player. Those are a couple that I like. Penn State, Oregon, Buckeyes. Do you have all of their lines at 10.5?
Yeah,
Yep.
they're all 3 at 10.5. That's funny you mentioned that.
Okay.
Tyler and I were talking about them when we were previewing this episode.
So essentially, to hit on the 3 big dogs right now, they'd have to go 11-1. Penn State goes to Columbus, Buckeyes go to Michigan, and I think Oregon goes to Penn State, right?
Yep.
So look, I think that one of those programs is going to finish 11-1 or better. And this was sort of the Oregon scenario a year ago. Oregon, first year in the Big Ten, ends up being the only team in the country to go unbeaten in their conference. And then, we all saw what happened in the rematch in the Rose Bowl. That thing was over even before the overtime Peach Bowl ended. But I like one of those teams to go 11-1. Again, maybe that gets back to the Penn State conversation. Can Penn State go 11-1, even if they can't get it done in Columbus, just with the way that the schedule is set up? I'm really interested in that. What do you guys have right now?
Let me ask you a question about Penn State real quick. If this came to me as I was driving today, if James Franklin, if Penn State, they lose to Ohio State and Columbus, but if they lose that game to Oregon at home and they go 10-2, what's the mood like around Penn State there, and what's the hot seat like for James Franklin at a 10-2 season?
Yeah. It should be non-existent in this era of football. This is why I was just saying about the Buckeyes. Think about it. A year ago, Buckeyes go to Oregon, lose a close one, right? And this kind of weird ending to a game where a rule has to get changed, and the narrative is, well, Dan Lanning just outcoached Ryan Day and pulled something out of his behind there at the end, running an extra guy on the field. So you lose a close one at Oregon, and then Michigan beat you again in a year where they're not even good, and Jim Harbaugh left. They beat you again. And then because of the expanded playoff, the Buckeyes are then able to run the table, beat Tennessee, beat Oregon in the rematch, beat everyone they played against. Penn State could do exactly the same thing. Again, getting back to the Kirby Smart point, there could have been panic. There was some panic that year when Georgia had that roster and they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. There's some Georgia fan screaming for Kirby Smart to get fired. And 3 weeks later, he wins the first national championship in Athens in 40 years, right? So hopefully there won't be any panic with inside the program or with the people that matter. If there's panic in Happy Valley when Penn State finishes 10-2 and has secured themselves a playoff spot, but before the playoff starts, then they deserve whatever happens to them, right? You deserve to lose every game, and I'd want to get out of there if I was James Franklin anyway. But now you go 8-4 or something with this roster, that's a different story, especially with how high the expectations are. But again, I think we're just in a different era of college football right now, where you may not see a team go undefeated every single year, or you may not see the national champion be undefeated every single year the way that we had seen for so long.
Yeah, and Coney, I don't think there'll be as much venom because obviously the rivalry's not, the game, but there'll definitely be some parallels if Penn State does lose to Oregon and if they lose to Ohio State at the end of the year. It could be very similar, and he could still have the same path that Ryan Day had last year after Ryan Day and Ohio State lost that game to Michigan, finished the season 10-2. The entire fan base, everybody was talking about, should Ryan Day be fired? People were talking about how ridiculous that was. Then he goes on that run in the playoff and wins a national title. To your point, Penn State could still absolutely do that in this new playoff era.
And how do you look in those losses too? Well,
Right.
one, are you even still in Big Ten championship consideration, which with 2 conference losses, probably not. But if one of those is in conference or out of conference or something like that, and you're still in Big Ten championship conversation, then of course there should be no panic, because you could still win the conference, which still means something to me. I don't know how other people around the country feel, but two,
Yep.
that the winner of that game automatically gets in the playoff, right? So there is something with that. But then also, even if you lose 2 conference games and you're out of contention for the championship, how did those losses look? Again, the Buckeyes lost by two games by a couple points combined a season ago. Is that how we're losing, or are we getting blown out when we go on the road to Columbus? I think about a young Marcus Freeman too at Notre Dame. Remember, he has to go on the road and play the Buckeyes, which is his alma mater, and they lose 17-14. And it was kind of weird there because the miscue on defense at the end made him look worse than what the actual score was. But again, that at least showed, hey, Notre Dame's here to be in this fight with a program like the Buckeyes under Marcus Freeman. And then look how he follows that up, right? He reaches the national championship game. So how you win or lose in some of these scenarios matters too.
Yeah, Coney, I'm going to keep the win totals train here going, and I'm going to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm going to buy into the year 3 Matt Rule. The Huskers are sitting here with a win total of 7.5. His 2 previous stops at Temple and Baylor, when everybody's talking about year 3 Matt Rule. At Temple, 2 wins, 6 wins, then year 3, 10 wins. At Baylor, 1 win, 7 wins, and then 11 wins in year 3 at Baylor. Nebraska, he had 5 wins and 7 wins, obviously question mark this year. Dylan Raiola, he was a true freshman, obviously former 5-star, but a true freshman playing in the freaking Big Ten, had an offensive coordinator change in the middle of the season, and obviously for the good with new OC Dana Holgerson. Holgerson's got a really good track record as an OC and has some pretty good coaching tree out there too, with Shannon Dawson at Miami and Jake Spavital at Baylor that's coached under him. But I love what they've done on the offensive side of the ball. Coney bringing in Dane Key from Kentucky and Isaiah Hall from Cal, both of which were leading receivers at their respective programs. They've got a veteran offensive line, and not all of them have been at Nebraska the whole time. But they brought in Rocco Spindler from Notre Dame, from one of the better offensive lines in the country last year. They brought in Elijah Pritchett, who played tackle at Bama for really the last 2 years, especially last year. And question mark for me would be for them, Tony White, really good defensive coordinator. He's always been really good. He did a great job at Nebraska. He went on to Florida State and got poached there, Mike Norvell at Florida State. But John Butler, the new DC, longtime NFL journeyman, was with the Buffalo Bills for a long time. Matt Rule promoted him from within. He was the DB's coach last year. And they brought in Phil Snow, too, who was Matt Rule's almost like a mentor to him at Baylor in the past. So I still think the defense will be fine. But when I look at this schedule, it is very advantageous. Like I've been telling Tyler, like if not now, then when for Nebraska as far as trying to get over that hump. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. And when did you ever think this would be a big deal? They don't play Indiana and they don't play Illinois. So they don't play 4 of like the top 6 or 7 teams in the big. And they get Michigan in Lincoln. They get USC in Lincoln. And of course, they got to go to Happy Valley and go to Penn State. I've personally got this Nebraska team going 9-3, but if they stub their toes somewhere else, because Nebraska's obviously been prone to do that in the recent years, if they do stub their toes somewhere and like lose to an Iowa or lose on the road at Minnesota against a solid PJ Fleck row the boat bunch up there in Minnesota, that's still 8-4, and it gets you to the window in that over 7.5.
Yeah, and you talking about them hosting USC. One interesting point that we just got done talking about here on Crain and Company is that hosting of USC is going to end a 4-game gauntlet for the Trojans. Now they get a bye; they do get a bye before they have to go to Lincoln. But still, the 4 games in a row in that stretch is absolutely brutal for USC. I have a lot of respect for Nebraska. I like them as a college football program. I like their fans, and you have to understand in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was really falling in love with the sport, that's like the Eric Crouch days, winning the Heisman Trophy, going and playing Miami in the national championship. And so that's what I still have in my head as to what is capable. Now, for a number of reasons, proximity to recruits, maybe moving off some coaches a little bit too early, you found yourself in a position where we're talking about a little bit like Auburn, to be honest with you, even though Auburn's had more success nationally in recent years, but where we're talking about, man, how can we finagle this schedule to where we get 8-4, and that's something to be optimistic about. I just saw Michigan go 8-5 a year ago with those two huge wins that you were talking about, and sign the highest rated recruit in the history of the program, and still we're like, man, what an awful year for Michigan. That used to be what the standard was for Nebraska. Is Matt Rule the guy to lead the Cornhuskers back to thinking 8-4 is a terrible year, rather than 8-4, that's optimistic and we should have some momentum behind us? I don't know the answer to that question. No one knows the answer to that question. But you talked about Dylan Raiola at quarterback. All of the talent is there, the talent capabilities. My biggest question here before we kick the season on August 23rd is, what was the growth like in the off season? If you copy and paste the Dylan Raiola from last year into 2025, I don't think your over is going to be hitting on the win total there. But then again, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think you're talking about a young quarterback who was a 5-star, who, idolizes Patrick Mahomes for better or worse, and you're going to see that growth into 2025. And if that's the case, I mean, the ceiling really does start to tip up a notch because of his talent.
I've got 2 win totals for the Big Ten. I'll start one off here. You mentioned them earlier, the Washington Huskies. I'm taking them over 7.5. I think with Jed Fish at the helm at Arizona, they had 1 win in that first season. They jumped to 5 wins in that second season. The trio they have with Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, and Denzel Boston on offense. Damon Williams could be a very sneaky dark horse Heisman contender in my mind. And I think in a lot of people's minds too, because you look at what Fish did in Arizona with Noah Fafita, right, in 2023. And obviously Tet McMillan there. And then, look at what they were last year. Like, obviously McMillan still goes in the top 10 in the NFL draft, but Fafita wasn't anything like he was in 2023 last year. So
it surprised me. I'll be honest. That surprised me.
Yeah. And then the defensive side of the ball, I mean, I know Fish had to replace a couple of coordinators, but I'm of the liking that I think Ryan Walters, some guys are just designed to be coordinators, right? They're not designed to be head coaches. And he hired him as the defensive coordinator to replace Belichick. And I think that's actually an upgrade in my mind. Like I have all the respect for Steve Belichick in the world, but I think Ryan Walters is a phenomenal defensive coordinator for what he did at Illinois a couple of years ago too, and what he did with that defense. Looking at the schedule, they got the 10th toughest strength of schedule in the conference, 36 in the Power Four, so middle of the pack there. They've got Colorado State, UC Davis, and Wazoo to open up the year. Should open up 3-0 there. I mean, they go to Washington State in the Apple Cup. They get Rutgers, Illinois, and Purdue all at home, going to the Pacific Northwest. I mean, Husky Stadium is right there. I mean, top 10 toughest places to play in the country in our eyes. You got to find 2 more wins after, if you assume those 6 games, you got to find 2 more wins. You go to Maryland, which again, traveling Seattle to Maryland is tough for anybody. At Michigan, that's going to be tough. At Wisconsin and at UCLA, they're all going to be tough games. And then you get home games with Ohio State and Oregon. I actually think they're going to get one of those games. They're going to upset either Ohio State or Oregon at home. I just think, they're going to have some momentum, especially with that Ohio State game. Ohio State, that's a tricky stretch for them in the schedule. And so having to fly all the way West Coast to Seattle to play the Huskies. And, we saw what obviously Oregon was a better team last year, but you saw how they performed in Autzen last year. And it's just a new venue for them. Kelly Ford has them favored in 9 games, including at Maryland and Wisconsin and UCLA. So I am taking Washington over 7.5 wins this year.
Well, I think you're onto something with the Washington over 7.5. As far as beating either the Buckeyes or Oregon, that certainly is a bold prediction. But remember, year one after this conference expansion, teams that had to go multiple time zones either direction really struggled. I don't have the stats right off the top of my head, but for a while there, they were like 4-14 or 4-16 or something crazy like that when teams had to go all the way across the country, which, shocker. How did we not think, that was going to, factor into the quality of ball we're playing during conference expansion? But either way, that's a whole different episode. Oregon's game really translates well to the Big Ten with the type of program that Dan Lanning has built. And even before he got there, they understand how important the line of scrimmage is with Dan Lanning learning under Kirby Smart and the way that they prioritize defense. And then still on offense, we can be explosive and do some things. USC, on the other hand, in the current state that it is under Lincoln Riley, I do not think translates that well to the Big Ten. Would have been much more suited to the Pac-12 or how he was when he came from Oklahoma in the Big 12, with the style of offense that he runs, and he hasn't been able to figure out the defensive side of the football. Unlike the USC teams that I had to play against in the Rose Bowl, when they got Brian Cushing running around and they have monsters all over the field, and Pete Carroll's just laughing his butt off over there because he knows he can beat you with his defense or his offense. That USC team would have translated to the Big Ten pretty well. Not right now. So back to the Washington point, is Washington going to be more like Oregon? And that program, the way it is right now, translates well to the Big Ten? Or are they going to be more like USC, where when you find yourself having to go to Ann Arbor or to Columbus or to Happy Valley or even up to Camp Randall late in November, can you win those type of football games in multiple ways? And so that's why I'm really interested to see, because like you said, Gamer at quarterback coming in. We know what Jed Fish can do. I'm glad you called out Noah Fafita, and it wasn't even just him. They had another quarterback at Arizona. Noah Fafita won the starting job too. I
Jaden
can't
Delora.
remember.
Jaden
Yeah,
Delora.
Delora, right? And I mean, they were having success with multiple guys. And I know they can do that part. And even with Will Rogers, right? Like you saw what they were capable of in a year after Washington lost everything. Not just your entire coaching staff goes to Alabama, but Michael Penix Jr. goes first round. You got multiple wide receivers going first round, and still you were able to see Jed Fish come in and put something together that resembled a program that can have success in the league. Again, will it be more of the USC variety? And look, they may have success too this year. I'm not saying they won't, but more of the Oregon variety, which they came in and won the league in year one. To do that, you got to run the football well, or at least consistently, and you got to play strong defense. Those are the two aspects to Jed Fish. I'm wondering, hey, can they win a game with their defense if they have to? Can they win a sloppy game late in the year if they're playing Michigan or Wisconsin on the road or something in the Midwest? Can they win a game by running the football and not necessarily throwing for 385 yards? That remains to be seen.
Lance, you got one more?
Yeah, Coney, let's stay out there on the West Coast, man. The weather's beautiful out there this time of the year for sure. Let's go to the Coliseum and talk about that bunch you were alluding to in USC. I'm a little bullish on the Trojans this year, man. The win total 7.5. It's also juice minus 135, so it kind of tells you that's kind of where Vegas is leaning a little bit too with that 7.5 number. Last year they had 5 losses by an average margin of 3.8 points per game. Pick six previews, they're awesome game grader metric that they use. They had them ranked, Brett Ciancia had them ranked 5th in the game grader metric last year in the Big Ten. Obviously, a lot of that's got to do with they had leads in the fourth quarter, they were playing well, and then they found ways to lose games there at the end. Something that interests me with this bunch is the fact that Lincoln Riley, quarterback whisperer, he did not go into the transfer portal and try to go find a quarterback. That tells me he likes what he's got in Jade Mayava. Mayava went 3-1 in his last 4, when he had his 4 starts there down the stretch. Had 14 total touchdowns in those 4 starts. Got to cut down on the interceptions a little bit, but you kind of expect that from a first-year guy in the Big Ten playing the competition they're playing against, like Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane are 2 of your better 1-2 punches at the wide receiver position in college football. They're bringing in the top JUCO player, period, in the country, and running back Waylon Jordan. He was on the national championship Hutchinson team with Kansas last year. Also bringing in Eli Sanders, who was an 1,000-yard back at New Mex last year. And D'Anton Lynn is one of my favorite defensive coordinators in college football and is a star in the making. The dude turned UCLA around immediately. Riley poaches him to USC when he was, like you were alluding to, they got to change that defensive side of the ball. In 1 year, USC in 2023 was ranked 114th in total defense. Last year, in the first year under D'Anton Lynn, he had them ranked 65th. And they were 117th in scoring defense, and he had them ranked 46th. That is a dramatic jump year over year. So in year 2 with D'Anton Lynn at DC, with what they're bringing back on offense, I don't think that Lincoln Riley has just completely forgotten how to coach. I look at USC's schedule too. Looking at it now, they've got at Illinois, early in the year on September the 27th. That game for Illinois and the Indiana game for Illinois is huge for Illinois as far as their win total is concerned when you were talking about them a minute ago, but obviously for USC as well. They get Big Blue Michigan in the Coliseum. That's going to be a fantastic game. And obviously they've got brutal road games at Notre Dame and at Oregon. There's 5 games on this schedule that I look at that you got to look at for it's a 5-game season, in my opinion, for USC as far as looking at this win total. If they go 2-3 in that stretch, then that's still I'm looking at 9-3. I've got USC going 9-3, but let's just say they go 8-4 and they drop one of these other games. That's still over, get you to the window again, get you over that 7.5.
Not so fast, my friend. Do not forget about the Georgia Southern Football Eagles week 2, my hometown, Statesboro, Georgia. And they're going to be led by who? Former USC coach Clay Helton, which is probably how this matchup got scheduled. I'll tell you what, I saw the Georgia Southern Football Eagles go out to Lincoln, Nebraska a couple years ago. I said they would beat Nebraska. Everyone thought I was crazy, and that's exactly what happened. So don't forget about them in the loss column, Lance. But
I
more
love it,
seriously,
man.
that 4-game stretch that we were talking about with at Illinois, Michigan at home, at Notre Dame, and then at Nebraska. I understand there's 2 bye weeks in there. You get a bye before Michigan, you get a bye before Nebraska. Still, that's 4 very tough games in 6 weeks, and that doesn't even include on the road at Oregon. That's really tough. But you brought up all the major points. D'Anton Lynn at defensive coordinator, that's been the biggest spot where Lincoln Riley just has not been able to figure this thing out. And then also bringing in a new strength coordinator, which J.D. Pickell, you should go watch our USC football preview that we put out with J.D. Pickell over on Crain and Company. You can check it out on our YouTube channel and all of that. And he was informing us about a new strength coordinator, which my question was, well, what were we doing before then? Like, was strength training not a priority, or was the guy that we had in not the right guy? That's still on you as the head coach. Anyway, just here's some things that, everybody's been wanting to pile on Lincoln Riley the last couple seasons, and I understand it. And I've been trying to figure it out in my head, because here's a guy who won double-digit games 5 of his first 6 years as a head coach. 3 of those were 12-win seasons. And I understand that those 3, that was at Oklahoma in the Big 12 years. That was pre-SEC Oklahoma, and I get that. At the same time, year 1 at USC, 11 wins, Heisman Trophy winner. I saw him go toe-to-toe when he was at Oklahoma with Kirby Smart in Georgia in that Rose Bowl, one of the greatest football games I've ever seen. That game could have gone either way. If you figure out a way to win that one at the end of regulation or overtime, that's you playing in the national championship, and that's without even being balanced. Of course, he has not been balanced enough. I don't care how good you are on offense. The phrase defense wins championships exists for a reason, and you can copy and paste that phrase to almost every sport for all time. So he got really close without even being balanced. And then, of course, Oklahoma fans pile on him after he leaves and says, well, he really wasn't the right coach for us anyway, and it seemed really bitter. And then 8 wins a year ago and then 7 wins a season ago. And you're like, man, were Oklahoma fans actually right about this? Yeah. And again, to the point of like a lot of that success in the Big 12, a lot of that success early in the Pac-12, and now you come into the Big 10. And again, I just don't think that game translates quite so well in this league, especially later in the year. I mean, there's a big difference between the first week of September, everything's bright and sunny, and you got a team in the Coliseum, and the end of November, and you're freezing your tail off because you're on the road in the Midwest against some of these teams, and you have to call your offense in different ways, or you have to win a game with defense. So I'm not quite so bullish right now, but again, I'll make a similar point. I'll make a similar point about USC that I did about Nebraska. You talking about 8-4? Okay, congratulations. 8-4 would hit that over win total, and everybody would make a lot of money with the line being 7.5. 8-4 should be bad at USC. 8-4 should be the worst year you have at USC with the capabilities that program has. And certainly when I got to play against them in the Rose Bowl, man, they beat us like a drum, dogs at every position. And that was, Pete Carroll was there then. Pete Carroll did such a great job of locking down that state. And then if they needed something extra, they would go outside in the rest of the country and they would get it, but they would lock down California. And so, again, I know Lincoln Riley, again, talking about guys who've forgotten more football than I've ever known. Lincoln Riley certainly up there in that category. But can you be balanced enough? And certainly giving D'Anton Lynn an opportunity at defensive coordinator should help contribute to that. Let's see how they do in that 4-game stretch, and including Oregon as well. And don't forget Georgia Southern, maybe you'll be right on the over total there.
All right, last one here, and then we'll finish up. I'm going to stay in LA. I'm going to talk about UCLA for a second. Their win total is at 5.5. I'm saying under. I'm saying no bowl for the Bruins this year. They had a mass exodus in the portal, which normally you would get a second-year bump from a coach, like Deshaun Foster in his second year. Their defense held up the end of the bargain last year, but they're 114th in returning production on the defensive side of the ball. For me, this is just a fade on Nico. And it's crazy. 365 days ago, everyone's talking about Nico at Tennessee in his first year going into, playing the SEC. And it was an up and down season, to say the least. And it was very underwhelming for a lot of people. Against 6 FBS teams with winning records, he was 85th in QBR, 88th in yards per attempt, 80th in completion percentage, and had just 5 touchdowns in those 6 games. So I just think, obviously, with the way he left everything, I mean, it was a bad look, PR wise, really everything around that. And UCLA bringing in Joey Aguilar from App State, at the beginning of the portal, and then kind of just kicking him to the curb once Nico was like, yeah, I want to play UCLA. Not a good look. That's got to be some bad karma there, right? They got the 5th toughest conference strength of schedule, the 18th toughest in the country. They get New Mexico and Maryland at home, should be W's. They're only favored in 5 games, so that's under the total right there, according to Kelly Ford. 2 of those are almost pick'ems, though. They got to go to UNLV week 2. We know Dan Mullen can do some work with some underdogs there. And they got to go to Michigan State, which he's got him at like a 51% chance to win that game. So that's basically a toss-up there. They got to go to IU, to Ohio State. They got to play USC across town. You need to find 3 more losses. I think that Utah to open the season is a tough one for them. I think Kyle Whittingham's going to be bouncing back this year. Penn State at home is a tough one for them to catch. Obviously, you got to find one more loss, right, to hit that under. The 2 I mentioned before, UNLV and Michigan State. Then they got home against Nebraska, home against Washington. I already like that Washington over, so I think Washington can go in there and they can beat UCLA. So I just don't think on those last 4 games, the UNLV, the Michigan State, the Nebraska, and Washington, they're not going to go 4-0 in those games. So I think it's going to be another tough year for Deshaun Foster and the Bruins this year.
I would hammer that under as well. I'm really down on UCLA, and it's sad because I understand they're such a proud athletic program, but it's not good when your head coach, Chip Kelly, would rather leave to be a coordinator for one of his former players rather than be your head coach. That's not great. Now, they're still going to get a lot of eyeballs on him because of the Nico Iamaleava situation. And look, man, you want to talk about having all the tools? Nico has them. And at the beginning of last year, when he was throwing the football so well and looked great, I was calling that out. And I said, man, this is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And he's a young kid. And I had a lot of people, mostly Tennessee haters, right, who said the right thing, but they said it on accident, where they're like, wait till he plays someone good and not just, balling against Chattanooga. And I said, touche, but I don't care if he's doing a lot of this on air, right? Like I've seen it. I've seen how it's supposed to look. And the kid has all the tools. Then he plays the best competition that he can, and he doesn't look great in those games. And the combination of not looking great in the biggest moments combined with his exodus and the way that he left Tennessee, I think has made him somewhat of a villain. And I think that is somewhat justified, but a lot of people are going to want to tune in to see that. They're going to hate watch, I guess is a term, like, hey, how poorly is Nico going to play? Or if he starts to play well, that's going to be an intriguing storyline as well. Hey, has Nico turned himself around? But the trifecta of going to, I think, a worse team with a worse roster than what you had, with worse coaching, and I've heard making less money. That's like the trifecta of negative, a negative bad move to me. And so I don't know. I would hit the under on that as well. But again, maybe they can figure something else out, and he ends up having a really great year. They're going to need him to sort of be like a a Cam Newton type difference maker, I believe, with the mass exodus of that roster to be able to win games, solely by himself at the end. If I'm proven wrong, then so be it. They'll clip this, and I'll deal with it accordingly.
All right, Coney, you get the last word here. You got anything else you like in the conference, and then any just final parting words on the Big Ten as a whole?
Well, look, I'm just excited to get this football kicked, man. And like you said, back-to-back national champs. I know the SEC is going to want to have something to say about that here coming up this year. And again, I think Clemson is really solid in the ACC as well. But the excitement that's coming out of the Big Ten right now, I think, is justified. And there's a lot of other teams that want to get up there towards the top. So I really appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it. And we can't wait to kick off football over here.
Yeah, David, this has been a blast, man. If you guys aren't checking out Crain and Company, we are big fans of that show. We love the guys over there, Jake and Blaine and David, obviously. David, let everybody know where they can find you on socials. Let everybody know what you got coming out this coming Friday. It's big news for you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. David Adam Cohn on Twitter and Instagram and all my social media. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Crain and Company, breaking down all college football all season for you guys. We love to do it. And yeah, I have a brand new music album coming out this Friday. That's Friday, August 8th. The album is called Richest Man in Town, and the single Richest Man in Town as a song was released last Friday. All of this music, there's 12 tracks on the album. This was produced by Nashville legend Kent Wells. He's Dolly Parton's producer, and I was really happy to get into the studio, and I'm excited to see what you guys think about it. It's a combination of some traditional country music vibes, but then also, just everything very steeped in a Americana vibe, Creedence Clearwater, Skynyrd, Southern rock type stuff. So if you guys like any of the tracks, please let me know.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Appreciate you guys all listening. Follow us on our socials, Instagram, TikTok, X. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We love hearing from you guys. For David Cohn and Lance Barton, I'm Tyler Noe. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time.